I'd like to call the Oconee County Planning Commission meeting to order. It's the Monday, July 15th, 2024. I'd like to start with an invocation, if Mr. Nix, you could lead us off on that.
Yes, sir. Pray with me if you will. Heavenly Father, we ask that you please watch over this committee and the planning staff and guide us to wise and safety-conscious decisions in support of the public. We also ask that you watch over the county law enforcement, first responders, and other county workers as they perform their duties, that they may return home safely to their families after every shift. And we ask that you please watch over the county and state leaders as they work to make the county and state a better place to live each day. In his name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Greg, could you lead us off in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like us to look over the minutes and see if I can get an approval for those minutes from our last meeting of June 17th.
I move we approve the minutes.
I'll second that. Do I hear any conversation, any discussion about that? If not, let's all vote to approve those minutes. Say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
So next up is the public comments for non-agenda items. And we have one person. As you know, this is a 4-minute time limit. We've got so many people in the room tonight that we're going to hold you tight to those time limits. When there's 1 minute remaining, I'll do this, and time's up, I'll do this. And Mr. Perry Smith, you are the only one signed up for non-agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I am Perry Smith. What I would like to do is express my gratitude to all of you for your steadfast commitment to upholding property rights in Oconee County. The protection of these rights is crucial for our community's prosperity and individual freedoms. It is disheartening to witness continuous efforts aimed at undermining our property rights. As Americans, we understand the fundamental importance of land ownership and the ability to utilize it as we see fit. I commend you all for standing firm in defense of these principles on behalf of all of us citizens in Oconee County. For years, AQD has consistently opposed personal property rights, obstructing property owners from selling or developing their land. This opposition is often cloaked under the guise of aesthetic improvements, which I find very misleading. Granting concessions to such requests not only jeopardizes the rights of individual property owners, but threatens the foundational rights of every citizen in our county. History shows that yielding to these demands only invites further encroachments on our property rights. We must remain resolute in our stance against these efforts. Even the smallest concession represents a significant erosion of our personal property rights. Thank you for your continued defense of property rights in Oconee County.
Thank you. That is the only public comment for non-agenda items. I did see some people come in the back of the room late. Was there anyone else that had a non-agenda item that they'd like to speak about? Okay. That takes us to commission member comments. Anybody want to say anything? All right. Then we come to staff comments.
Yep, I have a subdivision to share with you guys today. This is going to be Aggs Road. And let me zoom out and blow this up a little bit. new proposed subdivision, and then I'll swap back to this in just a second, but just give you some locational information. 96 acres. This is Blue Ridge Boulevard, 28. You're about 4 miles from the intersection with 123 right here.
Okay.
And we'll go back.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, James,
Yeah.
can you zoom back out again? I had a question about.
Yeah, sorry.
Is that the lumber mill next to this subdivision?
I'm not sure what's in that property right there, I'm sorry.
Lesnar,
Yeah.
or the dry king on that.
That's it, right?
That looks like.
You're talking about the kiln facility, kiln dry facility? I'm not sure if it is or not. Maybe.
Pretty sure it is.
Can you,
It's about in that location.
you click on it and see what the owner is?
I can. Pull that over so we're not.
Yeah, that's that lumber yard.
Menzer Investments is
Yeah,
the.
that's it. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
This property has a significant amount of green space with it. Looks like 25 to 35% green space that they're going to be using under a stormwater management plan for a lot of that. Any idea how much of that green space is going to be required to be clear cut due to state or federal or requirements regarding retention ponds and water redirection and other control stuff for that stormwater?
So this is the only page they've given us so far. We don't have a stormwater plan set yet, so I'm not sure how much cut and fill and balancing of soils on site or what kind of ponds would be required, the depth and width and all of the total retainage required.
Okay.
But we will see that at some point.
All right.
I can't read this small print. I'm just curious, James, about how much acreage is involved with most of these lots, just average, would you say?
Probably right around the 10,000 square feet. So some of these are all 12. These are all 9. So the cul-de-sac, obviously, you're gonna have some bigger lots. There's anywhere from 15 to 2,600. And then down here, you're back into that 9,000, 10,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, it's nice that it has such quick access to 28. All right. Were there any other comments that you had, James?
That was it. Just want to share that with you guys. Thank you for all those who attended our annual training this morning. If you couldn't make it, we can help you figure out the next available opportunities.
Sounds wonderful, thank you. All right. Next up, under item 8, is a discussion and recommendation by the Planning Commission regarding a lighting and buffer standard for residential developments. First up is public comments on that. And we have one signed up, Mr. Tom Markovich.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Tom Markovich, just in case y'all are wondering. I wanted to speak on this tonight because I see this as just another barrier to affordable housing. And also an affront to private property rights. While I do think that you all generally do a very good job of trying to protect property rights, this is an affront to property rights as far as I'm concerned. Now, before I actually get into the main part, what I'd like to do is, this is from your comprehensive plan, okay? Just to give you an idea, I mean, obviously this ordinance deals with lighting standards, buffer standards, and then open space standards. Now, so, from your comprehensive plan on land use, 80% of all the land, 80.8% of all the land in this county is agricultural or forest, Sumter National Forest, and then parks. And that total acreage is 80%, 80.8, almost 81% of the entire land mass in Oconee County. So, question number one is, do we really need more trees? I'm just saying. Now, in addition to that, this is again from your comprehensive plan on land use. And it states, there's a whole paragraph here, but I'm only going to read a few little sentences in it. In addition to abundant natural resources, Oconee County residents and visitors have access to the Sumter National Forest, 4 state parks, 3 county parks, the Stubhouse Mountain Tunnel, Issaquena Falls Park, and a new mountain bike park. 193 miles of trails, ranging in size from small spurs to less than a mile to 77-mile foothills trail. Many of the trails lead hikers to 150 waterfalls and other destinations. So when I think about open space, this whole county is open space. And as far as recreational activities and as far as people being able to go and do things, if they can't find something to do in this county, they're not going to find anything anywhere. And then also, same element in your comprehensive plan. Housing and affordability data in the housing element indicates that 45% of all renters and nearly 30% of all homeowners in Oconee County are cost burdened, paying more than 30% of their household income for homeowner cost of rent and associated cost of utilities, taxes, and insurance. Now, this was done 4 years ago. Think of what those rents and those associated costs of home ownership are today. Inflation has been through the roof, interest rates are through the roof, and all of that is driving the housing market and the ability to afford a home. So, that brings us to the specifics of this particular ordinance. Number one, the lighting standards. I'm just going to point to a couple of things. It looks at the idea of putting an overall height of fixtures not to exceed something feet. Now, I have built houses in this county because of topography. Some of them are one level and no more than 20 feet tall. I have built other houses that are 4 levels and they're over 50 feet tall. I don't know how you come up with a number for establishing a height for lighting that is ever going to accommodate the various different types of light homes. There's other things there, but that's the main thing. Buffer standards. First off, again, I go back, how many more trees do we need? I'm serious. And when I was driving up here, and I'm just looking on each side of the highway, and everywhere I'm driving, and all I'm seeing is trees. And so, I really kind of question the need for that. Also, the other thing that's interesting in the crafting of that particular section, it defines a buffer as a continuous border, continuous area creating an undisturbed, maintenance-free, self-repair. So, and this applies to all the parcels. So how do you get into the lot? It's got to have a continuous border. I just don't understand. So, and then the open space standards. The biggest issue with the open space standard is having to have that thing set up as probably going to be homeowners association. All homeowners associations generally have joint and several liability. For those of you who may not be a business and don't understand that, joint and several liability is not a good thing, okay? Because when some little child scratches their knee in that open space and that open space gets sued, everybody in there is on the hook for that lawsuit, period. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, just kind of in opening, just to kind of give an overview before we have additional discussion about it. This was put on the agenda, and I immediately called James and asked kind of where this came from, because I know it didn't come from across our desk. Although we've talked about different things, this specifically hadn't come across ours yet. It looked like a finished document, or almost finished document. So I did look into it, and in fact, there was a county council meeting in November 21 of 2023, and that this was initiated. It looks like from the resulting discussions that it was a conversation initially between Mr. Root and Mr. Elliott trying to come up with, to fashion some information here. And based on that meeting, and then based on the Economic and Planning Subcommittee of Council, it seemed as though this was put forth as kind of a springboard of information and not a ready for approval information type document. And so that's kind of where this hit our agenda. I've got several takes on it, but I'd like to kind of open it up to others first before I make a statement. So who else would like to take the floor?
Mr. Chairman, this is David. If I could just jump in to help a little bit more with the posture of the ordinance. I think you covered 80% of it, but just to fill in the gaps.
Thank you. Please.
It was Mr. Elliott brought up and made the motion to have a lighting, screening, buffering ordinance put in place, start drafting one. I drafted one just in this form, and I think this is the first take of it, just as you noted. It went to county council for them to start discussing some of the parameters, filling in the blanks, and if they wanted to go with this or not, as a general ordinance. They referred it to the Economic Development and Planning, or Planning and Economic Development Subcommittee of County Council. Didn't make it to it on its first meeting. Second meeting had some, I would say service level discussions, and then forwarded it on to you all. That's why we have, I guess this ordinance is probably about 8 months old since it initially started, but no work, no revisions have been done. It was just sent to you all because obviously it's within your bailiwick to make sure it harmonizes with anything else you're doing, and just for your review, revisions, comments, report in general.
Thank you. Anything else on that, along that line?
No, sir, that's the essence of it. There's obviously blanks that need to be filled in, but this is very much in the outline form. It's put forward in the outline form, so it would, just as you said, be a springboard to any discussions on legislation to touch on these areas.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
If at any point
Excuse me, I just have, I need to get this clear in my mind, I'm sorry. But Mr. Root, when you said it went to the Economic Development Committee, what did they do with it? I missed that part.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it actually was in that committee for 2 different meetings spanning this period of time. That's why I was just trying to give us a chronology. The first meeting, we ran out of time. It never even got addressed. So it got held over to the second meeting. That meeting, I think, was canceled. And so then it just recently came back up to another meeting, and they said, all right, let's send this to the Planning Commission. This is something that obviously within the area of work that you all do. And so they wanted your comments, edits, revisions, anything.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to unless somebody else has something immediately, I just wanted to kind of read my take on it and then continue that conversation.
I'll make a motion that we kill this ordinance.
I'll second the motion.
I'll second.
Now for discussion.
Well, I'd like to say that if one of the council members feels that this is important enough to ask Mr. Root to look into it, and then the Economic Development Committee is interested enough to hear what we've got to say about it, I don't see why we would just squelch any kind of pro or con opinions that we might have, because this is an opportunity for us to do the work we're asked to do for the community.
I agree that we do need to give input so that it does go back to council, and so if I could start. As this ordinance is written, it seems to clearly deal with residential development and residential-related structures and residential improvements. Nowhere in the document does it reference dealing with commercials areas of subdivisions or HOA public areas of a subdivision or right-of-way or streetscapes or things like that. So we truly are dealing with residential structures, et cetera, based on the way the document is written. The ordinance specifically states that it applies to residential developments for the express purpose of adequate lighting for security and safe passage, among other things, and to minimize the effects of such lighting on view sheds and nightscapes. It always brings back memories in the fall when I see the Friday night lights of the high schools, and you know the football game is going on, and to me that's really cool to see that. And yeah, I would not want those lights shining every night of the week. Friday, it's cool that you can see where the high schools are located. So that brings back memories. But those are commercial applications that could produce obnoxious lighting. Yet there's nothing in the ordinance that deals with commercial applications. I also can't imagine a developer putting that type of obnoxious lighting within a residential area and expect to sell homes. It would seem the other way around. I could see new commercial areas affecting the tranquility of existing neighborhoods, but not the way this ordinance is written. But that's just one example. Consider Part 2, Item B. The ordinance says that the lighting plan is to be submitted at the initial subdivision application. So that makes you think you're dealing with entranceways and street lights. But again, I can't find where the ordinance says that anywhere. In fact, the ordinance suggests controls of lightings on buildings and ground-mounted fixtures. So we're talking about residential porch lights and sidewalks that have Malibu lighting rather than some of these other things as defined, because they're not. Again, the document simply doesn't specify about public spaces or HOA-controlled spaces or entrances or clubhouses or anything like that. It talks about the structures within a residence. I've just never heard of a residential subdivision residents of a subdivision complaining about the streetlights within their neighborhood if those streetlights were developer designed. If a development had those stadium lights shining on homes, you just simply wouldn't purchase a home in that neighborhood. Then we get to the next page regarding the buffer standards, and that was kind of Mr. Markovich talked about, but it says the purpose of buffering is to mitigate impact between different types of land uses, i.e. commercial use next to a residential use. But the ordinance restricts subdivision street lighting and front porch lights, but doesn't restrict a nearby Target store or the gas station at the neighborhood entrance. Again, it just seems like this ordinance is written completely backwards. Then we get to item C under buffer requirements, and it says under C1 through C5 that vegetative buffer or hedgerow or shrub of tree shall be placed all around the outer perimeter of all lots to create a continuous border, all four sides. It then says the buffer shall be blank feet wide. Well, considering our ordinance already has residential side setbacks of 5 or 10 feet, it sounds like that this is truly a Beverly Hills style hedgerow that is asked to be being created between homes. But as far as the roadside having a continuous hedgerow, our ordinance already in chapter 26 says that everything must be cleared 15 feet from the road down to the roots. So we're already in exact conflict with existing road construction. So again, I can't imagine these buffering standards having any real residential application. I can't think of an existing subdivision where the subdivision lights that are currently out there are offensive or obnoxious for living in that residential subdivision. It's my opinion, therefore, that while I would love to discuss some lighting standards that for commercial applications, maybe some down lighting and things like that, so we don't have football stadium type lights 7 days a week on anything and everything, I think that this lighting standards have zero application within a residential subdivision. The only application I could see is if we're talking about a front entrance of a subdivision and the lighting on that. And if that were the case, I would say that it would not be a grandfathered situation, that it would apply retroactively to every subdivision in town, because then it would tell us real quick what existing citizens of those subdivisions feel like is obnoxious, because they wouldn't want to necessarily make changes to their own. So I would agree that as written, maybe ask the planning commission to come back with some sort of lighting under a commercial application, but this as written has really zero application for our county. That's my opinion.
Bob?
Yes, sir.
Really, the nugget of wisdom that I see in the lighting standards is that D, 2D. I mean, I know that's vague as can be, but lighting shall not illuminate neighboring properties or distract, harm the traveling public on the roads. Well, that's just common sense. I mean, that is one good thing in it.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree, and that almost it would be an HOA requirement. I know several HOAs do say that if you've got security lights that are coming on and off, that they have to be pointed in a certain direction here or there, but that again is controlled by the HOA rather than the county controlling it. And if it is the county controlling it, how often do we control it? Because this says it has to be controlled at the time that we make application, not at the time that the house is built. So does it go under building codes or does it go under planning approval? And then if it is there, how often do we police it? And do we police it only when the neighbor says a light's shining in my window, or do we go by once a year and have everybody turn on their security lights? Again, I think this document has nothing to do with residential development.
Can I ask a question? Would the lighting standards make more sense if it was for a mixed-use development rather than just residential?
I think it may have an application within an apartment building, within their parking lots maybe, like it would at a Target store parking lot or a Walmart parking lot where you have some downward facing lighting. But I think that could easily be incorporated under some future commercial application. Just my opinion.
Anybody remember the county council meeting in February of 2012 when we had a lighting, buffering, and zoning ordinance, and we filled up this room with people saying we don't want people taking our property rights away, telling us what to do? That's where this is again. 2 years later, we're trying to do this again. Somebody is.
Well, this document as written truly, again.
This is not even as good a product as the last thing.
The last
It's not enforceable. There's no detail in it.
Well, we are
It's not
dealing with
even-
front porch lights, in my opinion, based on the document as it's written, because the residential structures are the homes.
Rick?
So, and again, if somebody's building streetlights, a developer themselves is not going to build a streetlight that it would be obnoxious to the people living in that subdivision, because people wouldn't move into that subdivision. So,
I agree with that. I do not agree with this standard at all. But I think there is room for a lighting standard to be similar to a noise ordinance,
I'm sorry, what?
similar to the noise ordinance.
Oh, thank you.
I live out in the country, and I see neighbors that move in. I guess they're from the city because they're scared of the dark. And they'll put out 3 or 4 of those lights on a telephone pole to light up the whole yard. Well, it also lights up that neighbor's yard who does not have any lights in their yard and hasn't for many decades. So, looking at property rights, we've got to make sure that the neighboring property is not affecting its neighbors in a way that it makes it undesirable for them. Now, I'm not talking about the value of the property. I'm talking about somebody trying to go to sleep with a light shining in their bedroom window. It's out of the norm for them. And I think that there's some room for this, for us to kick it back and maybe approach it from that, get away from the buffering standards. I already looked at that in the past, and it's amazing the amount of acreage this buffering standard will take up. And when we do look at the lighting standard, if we do decide to go back, kick it back, it needs to have something that's measurable. How many luminous of change with that light off on the neighbor's property to on is acceptable? It's got to be a measurable thing. It can't be opinion. So I see some room in here to protect property rights across the board. But I don't think this is it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, this isn't something that should tie to a development standard, but to housing in general across the county.
I think that there's one thing that really aggravates a lot of people is their neighbor moves in and he has a spotlight, or he has a outside light, halogen light on a telephone pole that is shining right onto their house or their property, or maybe their sitting area where they used to watch the sunset. Those kind of things, you're no longer maintaining what you're doing on your property. You have crossed across the property line and you're now infringing on their peace.
I've seen those old telephone poles that have the old city lights on them, and they tend to span out in a 365-degree angle as opposed to some of the new commercial applications that direct that light down to stay within the perimeters of the parking lots or whatever. So I like the way you phrased that as far as something similar to a noise ordinance that is just a general lighting ordinance, maybe even tie it within a commercial application as well.
I think it would go across the board. It would be anytime you're infringing across that property line. And that itself will drive buffering if it needs to be, without requiring buffering. Because they would say, hey, if I want to put these lights up, I got to do something about the intrusion on the neighbor's property.
So I want to continue to get people's input, but right now we've got a motion that says we'd like to kill this ordinance. Do we want to go back to council and say, this is not at all what we think it should apply to or how it should be applied, but we are willing to work on something that might have application?
I would like to amend David's friendly amendment, if you would allow, that we send this back to council with the purpose to create it similar to a noise ordinance and bring it back.
I would like to make sure that council does ask us to put that back on the agenda, because it would be bringing things to a priority. And I sure don't mind prioritizing if council says to put it as a priority. We've still got our list that we've got to figure out where that is. So I would like, if we send this back under, we want to kill this, we are willing, I'd like it to say that they need to ask us to come back and put this as a priority on our list, if that's important.
I just have one other thing in the lighting area is this whole idea of uplighting instead of downlighting. There's a real problem in the world, and specifically in more populated areas of the United States, where light pollution is aggravating people, it's aggravating natural organisms, if you want to say, animals, insects, all different kinds of things. So anyway, I just want to get it out that, I think we've got more than just humans to think about as far as aggravation. The uplighting that some people use is really bad for the environment.
Do you see more of that uplighting in commercial applications, on billboards, on signage, on entranceways in a subdivision maybe, rather than in somebody's front yard, a Malibu light shining up on the house or shining up on a tree as being the issue?
Well, I see what you're trying to, get to there, but my answer would be, it doesn't matter until it matters. And where it matters, we should try to cover those areas for the environment, for humans, for other plants, animals. We should be thinking ahead and trying to do something to reduce light pollution. Even if we can't do something about what's there now, we should be thinking of the future.
Don't disagree. I love seeing the stars, and they're brighter on some nights than others. But what's our next step? Do we
Well, we got a,
have
You have an amendment.
any more discussion on this?
Yeah, if you don't mind me mentioning, it was proposed that an amendment be made. It was not allowed to be seconded, but as far as legitimate, way of trying to move forward with Mr. Haney's idea, I think we could vote on I think he used the terminology, kill the ordinance, which is, it's not an ordinance. But anyway, if we were to vote that down and then allow Mr. Haney to make another motion, I think it would be clear cut.
that's a non-agenda item, right?
This is written as an ordinance.
It's not an ordinance.
Okay, it's proposed as an ordinance.
Let's let James, he wanted to say something?
Just kind of back into what council and the Planning and Economic Development asked for was to try and get it back in the recommendation form, where we came back last month and made the recommendation on the Chapter 38 amendment. If we can kind of think about it that way when we're focusing on making the amendment to the original motion. So maybe an amendment to recommend not to proceed with it as currently written, but to continue with a lighting standard across the county or something to that kind of effect would probably be what they're asking for. And if you want to add something in about, and would like a guidance from council or from Planning and Economic Development on continuing with that lighting standard, to ask for that back from them if that's what you're looking for.
Along with what James was saying, the only thing I would want to add to that is that I do want council to ask us to do this if it is important to them. I mean, we still have a pretty full plate, and we've still got the remaining of the year to go through our 5-year update on the comp plan. I want to understand from council if this is a priority to address the lighting standards, as I think that some kind of commercialized lighting standard developed should be considered or discussed. But as this stands right now, I don't think that I think I'm hearing the recommendation is that we do not want this as written to have any legs to move forward. So we have a motion to kill it on the table. We've had a suggested amendment, but it was not seconded. So right now we have a motion on the table to kill this thing as it is written. If you're ready to vote, if there's no more discussion. Mr. Nix, did you have a statement? All those in favor of killing the current ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-2.
Mr. Haney, would you like to add a new motion?
Not at this time. If council wants to bring it forward, we can.
Does anyone else want to make a motion? All right, moving on to the next item.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before
Yeah.
we move on to the next item,
Yes,
just to
sir.
make sure, pass this back to council, because this definitely was an inchoate ordinance, meaning it was supposed to be, it's going to be filled out either by them or by you, not by the planning commission now. They may do it. However, maybe not, likely not, I don't know, we'll see. But when I pass it along, hey, planning commission does not want to consider this, recommends that it doesn't go forward, equals killing it, make no mention of the lighting notion, or do say something like, hey, council or planning commission would consider, a light, if you all are interested in it, an ordinance that would govern lighting across the county, or just leave that be.
If councilmen watch our meeting, I think it's pretty clear that this is talking about houses and porch lights, and I can't imagine that anybody would want to proceed forward with filling in those blanks. But unless somebody else sees a need to explain that further, I think we are settled on leaving it as it is.
I think there's a lot of value in what Mr. Haney brought up, and also the value of the light pollution idea. If we were to ask Mr. Root to say that we were interested in continuing discussions about lighting standards, I don't see any harm in it. If we need a motion to have him do that, or if we need to vote, I'll move that we ask Mr. Root to say what I just said without having to repeat it.
Could I do this real quick? I'm sorry, Mr. Dolan, if I could just interrupt, because I think I may have been misunderstood. The ordinance to be filled out and made fulsome and full, it wasn't really a matter of filling in the blanks, so there were those. This whole thing was an outline truncated form to be filled out initially as contemplated by council. They just wanted to get us, jump off. As it is now, it was pushed to you all, so you could ostensibly just say, hey, no buffering, no open space, or maybe lighting standards, which is part of this, but we don't want it applied to residential, or we do, however you want to do that. I'm just saying that the mechanism for y'all to do something with this ordinance, just cutting away the stuff you don't like and focusing on lighting, is there. I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for the commission. Obviously having a dog in the hunt.
Yes, sir, Mr. Nix.
Point of information, the vote was to kill the entire ordinance, lighting, buffering, and open space.
That's correct. Mr. Root is asking, do we need to take any additional information back to council? If I'm speaking for you, so I'm speaking out of turn, please correct me. Asking if we need to take something back to council saying we would consider a discussion of some type of lighting standard, just not a residential application of lighting standard. I think it's what he's asking.
That is what I was asking, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I was just, instead of just saying, hey, they said kill it, do I give the rest of the conversation, or y'all are not interested in it? I just wanted to get that clear in my mind.
Yeah, we are not interested in a residential, as it is written, that talks about control of residential subdivision lighting of residential homes and things like that. And this has no direction that says that this is simply dealing with rights of ways or HOA areas or clubhouses or anything like that. This is truly saying anything that is a structure built within the acreage of something called a subdivision. And so we've killed it. Council is welcome to ask us to come back and address some lighting stuff. And as chairman, I'd be happy to put that on the agenda.
All right, now I understand. Thank you. That's what I needed clarification on. Thanks.
All right. Unless there's any more conversation on that, let's move to item number 9. It's a discussion regarding the options for setback enforcement. When a parallel does not meet the minimum lot width at the right-of-way property line. There are no public comments on this. Mr. Root had given several options. Just to kind of recap and remind everyone of why this has come up, is when you go to chapter 38, I don't know how many pages in, under definitions, it talks about building setback line. And it defines the building setback line, and it talks about the front yard setback, the side yard setback, and the rear yard setback, and corner lot setbacks, because those could be, a corner lot could be two sides that were front side setbacks. Then it talks about flag lots. And people have an image of a flag lot that's actually pictured in chapter 32 of a flagpole extending out to a lot. The problem is that in the definitions, it says that the build area, the front side setback, that going vertical begins, we'll use residential for example, and I'll say the front side setback is 25 feet, that it begins at the right-of-way. And the definition says it begins at the right-of-way. But our current application is that we're considering everything below the minimum build area lot width. So under residential, in the build area, the lot has to be 80 foot wide in order to go vertical on the property with structure. But we're using it also to apply to the setback. And in my opinion, the definition setback says the setback shall begin at the right-of-way, but we're applying it to everything below 80 feet that the right-of-way then starts. So that may have made it more confusing, but where we were trying to get to, or where I was trying to get to, was to say that we either need to, A, define what a flag lot width is. It's a driveway, you reach to both sides, or whatever that is, to define a flag lot. Because right now, we're using pie-shaped lots or any lot that's less than 80 foot wide and defining it under the flag lot criteria. And so homes that, if the lot is 79 feet wide and the neighbor's lot is 81 feet wide, he's building 25 feet back and the other guy's potentially building 50 feet back. Yes, sir.
Can you say we are interpreting it that way? Who's we?
Right now, staff.
Okay.
Planning staff is interpreting this lesser amount. And I think planning staff
Is that
has,
interpretation consistent with other counties and other practices?
it would be a great question for James.
Yes. So we looked at as many counties as we could in South Carolina. The majority were implying it the same way we were, and that's why we came up with basically 3 options for you guys to really clarify how the setback is measured when the parcel does not meet that minimum width at the front property line.
Okay, so one more question.
Yep.
So these 3 options, is the intent to try to decide on one of these 3 options and then roll it into an ordinance?
Yes, sir.
The right place in the ordinance? Where would we put that?
Chapter 38.
James, you sent some pictures. Can you describe what these
Okay,
pictures
yeah,
are showing?
So let me scroll in here, and then I'm actually gonna pull it up on the zoning map so we can kind of use some of the measurement tools.
Before we go down
Yeah,
that rabbit
absolutely.
hole, I got a question.
Yeah.
So I do not think flag lots, the definition is defined in our development standards, is that true?
There is a definition. There are several things that talk about flag lots in 32, and then under 38 it says, on a flag lot, the building setback line runs parallel. It describes how the flag lot is to be worked, but it doesn't define the flag lot here. Is it defined anywhere else, James?
It's,
I think it's defined in 32.
I would have to check.
I've
on
searched
it.
for it, I cannot find it, that's the reason I was asking that question.
Yeah, it is.
Because if the definition of a flag lot does not exist, I think before we start diving into how we should deal with flag lots, we gotta first understand, what are we calling a flag lot?
There's a picture of a flag lot with its definition.
Yes, but that,
That
you know,
describes it.
there's not a defined width on the flagpole. I mean, just because it looks like a flag lot, that may be 10 acres across, and then with 50 acres behind it. That doesn't make it a flag lot. That has to have a certain amount of setback. So what is the defining features of a flag lot? Is it that 50-foot flagpole that extends into the property?
And I think that based on the discussion last time, both things need to be equally measured, because one, I think that the flag lot definition, which is pictured right here, he's got up, is not all-inclusive, because it says that it's at minimum 30 feet wide. Well, I know of lots that are less than 30 feet wide as a driveway getting into something. So that, I don't know that can it say that, but it says minimum flagpole width of 30 feet wide, but it doesn't have a maximum width,
Correct.
like you said. So one, I think maybe this is weak, but I also think this is in conflict with 38 that says that the setback shall be at the right-of-way, not at the point at which the flag lot extends to 80 feet.
Well, I think in defining the flag lot, you will shake out
Potentially shake out the other.
the other.
So does that help, Mr. Root? And if so, do any of these 3 suit that? Because I was thinking number 2 was probably the closest.
And looking at these, so going back to when we first discussed this, I thought these options came from James, and I think they're good options. He's just more familiar with the planning aspect of how this would work. Legally, probably any three of them work fine except for number one. Number one obviously is where we're at. But 2 or 3. 3 seems to be just thinking of potential problems from a legal standpoint in the future, perhaps better, because you could have the staggered flag lots and essentially below the lot extends, and that could essentially have no setback there behind someone's backyard, if you can understand what I'm saying. But it makes sense what you were saying. Definitionally, if he just goes one of these, I don't know how much tweaking the flagpole would need. I think the flag lot would need. I'd probably end up revising it out, just so we could just deal with irregular lots in general. But any of these would work. 2 and 3, I think, work well. 3 probably works best from avoiding potential future disputes. I just don't know what the X would be. Maybe 5 feet, 10 feet, something similar to the side setback.
James, before we go through 2 or 3, can you talk about the photos, the images?
Yeah.
And give your opinion about the images.
So I just wanted to give you some examples. This first one, this is actually a lake residential zoned area. And you have this picture, but I'm gonna pull it up on here just because it gives us the ability to kind of do some measurement tools and things like that. I'm gonna turn the zoning off so we can see a little bit better too on some of these. And what we basically talked about is kind of where some of the existing houses are and then what the defining features of these lots are as well. So all of these lots that border both Sweetwater and Longview Ridge, none of these meet the minimum lot width anywhere on the actual parcel. So this is the parcel that had the variance hearing to reduce the front setback, because they had front setback on 3 sides, right? So this received a variance and this received a variance at the same time. You can kind of see, as you go down the street, some of these houses are, 50 feet from the center line of the road, 30 feet from the center line of the road, another 30, but further up, you're probably gonna be much closer to that 25, 30. No matter what you did with the minimum lot width on these lots, they're gonna have a variance anyway. And then you've got some that are closer and some that are further from the road. But all of these are gonna have problems with the way that 80-foot minimum lot width is defined, right?
I'm assuming that in the future, the planning department is not approving subdivisions that come in with unbuildable properties on them to begin with.
Correct.
Say that again? What did you just say?
That if a new subdivision came in, so like one of the ones we just rezoned for Lake Residential, if they're trying to create new lots that are gonna be less than 80-foot wide, because they're already in a Lake Residential district, we would want them to meet the minimum lot width. So we would have a recourse to say, the lots you're creating don't meet the standard that's in chapter 38. So they need to be at least 80 feet wide. In a control-free district, that's gonna be different. So there is not gonna be a minimum lot width in that control-free district. The second page, let me pull that up real quick. So this is another residential, sorry, go ahead.
You talk, I see some stuff that I think you're gonna be going to, but I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, so I was looking for kind of weird and odd-shaped lots, and this is residential. I've got the zoning turned off. But, you've got anything, these houses are obviously way off. This lot is gonna meet right at the 80-foot, somewhere in here, outside of the cul-de-sac, and is gonna be maybe 30 feet off of there. So that's gonna meet the setback at 25.
So see, looking 4 lots over in your example, I would say that is a true flag lot.
Yeah,
I would even say that the lot to the left of that could potentially be a flag lot.
potentially. So even this lot, right here, isn't gonna meet that minimum lot width until you get into this open area.
Are you in this section at all?
So that's gonna be right in here.
Um,
Where are you?
No.
Which page are you
I
on?
think it's up higher in the picture.
So that's gonna be sideways, so if you're,
Oh, I got you.
turn that 90, there you go.
So do TMS 162-06-01-047.
There you go.
Yep. So the lot just north of it, I would not consider that to be a flag lot. I would consider at the point at which that lot is 80 feet wide, you should be able to go vertical.
Does it get 80 feet wide?
Probably in there somewhere, yeah.
It's close.
So
Where the house starts.
our rule right now, where I think the rule should be, is that it has to accomplish two things. One, that it has to meet at least the minimum distance from the right-of-way. And two, under residential, which has an 80-foot width in the build zone, that you have to be at least 80 foot wide in the build zone in order to build, which this does accomplish that. But what we're doing is we're taking and saying, once the lot hits 80 feet wide, now we add the 25-foot setback. And I'm saying, at the point at which that lot hits 80 feet wide, you should be, without going to a variance, be able to start building like they did. Because right now, if I'm correct, James, the lot is now 80 feet wide, and under today's standard, we would now say, okay, in residential, you have a 25-foot setback, so we would set that home 25 more foot back than it currently exists.
That's correct.
And now they have to go get a variance because now they're too close on the backside, especially in the lake, and now they're building a real skinny house that doesn't work or it doesn't meet the standards within the HOA, when easily you should be able to build within the build zone based on the definitions of what that build zone is.
And I think that gets into either option 2 or option 3 on if you want to amend it.
Distance from the right of way. I thought that 2 most accurately described it. The distance from the right of way, front property line, shall be the measurement for the setback. The buildable area shall not include any area where the minimum lot width is not met. I mean, you do have to accomplish 2 thresholds. You can't build if the lot's less than the width of the designated zone, and you have a minimum setback off the front property line, and side property lines, and back property line. But they shouldn't run contiguous, they should run overlay. If that makes sense. And I don't know that this has been, Mr. Root, what I just said is, do either one of these definitions accurately portray that?
Well, yes. If we look at the escape trail, you have that group of parcels back up. There's a lag on the YouTube, but I'm looking at it. If you look at escape trail and lot number 33, which I think would probably fit in your customary definition of a flag lot. What I was referring to before, why I thought number 3 was a good option, I think this kind of illustrates it well. If you look at, and maybe James could tell me differently, but if you look at lot 33, once the flagpole is done, you get to, say, the minimum width. That's right at the backyard of the lot ended in TMS 039. So that's why I thought if that's going to be the front, also measured as a front, instead of building right on that lot line in their backyard, then add 5 or 10 feet. So that's the only thing I was talking about with that. But James, perhaps, would you still, if you're looking at the back of 039, would you consider that for lot 33 still the front, or would that be another side?
We would probably measure, sorry, go ahead.
What's the distance between when you do the distance thing, I don't know how to say it, from the point across where it goes down, then, yeah, thank you.
85. So that is, coming out of the flagpole essentially is where it meets the minimum lot width immediately. We would typically say that would be the front on that side where it opens up.
So Mr. Root, this kind of is a little bit atypical in that, in my opinion, we've got two different objectives. One, we have this objectives of defining where the setbacks start in general. And then two, we have an objective of truly defining and outlining what a flag lot is. In my opinion, one of the issues that we've been seeing lately is where a developer will take an existing road, they'll build a house on the road, they'll then have a driveway going behind that house to another house so that they can save on their construction cost of road building. In that case, the house behind the house probably does need to start their setback at the point at which that flag lot opens up, no matter what that is. It needs to be farther away from the back door of the back of the house. So I don't know that we can just say, 5 feet. I think there needs to be a true front side setback. But in doing so, that means truly defining what flag lot is then.
Yeah, I think that's you, Mr. Chair. I think that's
So
your
I think
call.
we've got two different issues that we're trying to accomplish. One, just saying that if it's not a flag lot, it's not a flag lot, and let's handle it like the front side is at the right of way. If it's a flag lot, whatever that definition is, then we determine what is that setback and when does it start.
Can I ask a question? So we're here looking at a few lots here. I'm sure there's a zillion peculiarly shaped lots across the county, and I guess I'm trying to understand the why we are talking about this. Because we have a mechanism in place to handle special exceptions, and that's the BZA. And so I want to make this point that I looked at the agenda items. So far for 2024, from January to current date, there's been 11 variance requests for setbacks, whether front, rear, or side. 11. James, can I ask you, how many homeowners do you think there are in Oconee County?
40,000.
40,000?
Addresses, probably more.
So, what, 10% is 400? Is that my math right?
Yeah, 4,000.
No, 4,000. So 1% is 400? A half a percent is 200? So we've got 11 people upset, but all of those requests were approved. That's like less than a half a percent, and we're trying to make an ordinance, and we already have a vehicle that accepts special exceptions and works with the homeowner in giving them what they want. I guess why are we breaking something that's working? And then again, in 2023, there were also 11 requests granted, and it's just the system seems to be working without picking out every single lot. That's going to be really difficult because you make this, this special exception an ordinance, and then 6 months from now, there might be another special exception to that. Do we need another ordinance? It just seems like our system of requesting variances for special exceptions is working, and it's a little more all-encompassing than something that's going to deal with less than a half of 1% of the homeowners.
So to answer your question, since it was a question of why are we doing this, one, it's not about percentages in the county of right and wrong. What it's a matter of is we have conflicting information within our ordinance, and we have conflicting application based on what the definition says. So if you're the one guy, even if it's one guy that's having to go hat in hand to a 7-member board and say, can I do what I think I can do on the property based on the definition that is written here, would you want to be the one guy that's having to go hat in hand to a committee that they should not have to go to simply because we haven't truly written our ordinance? So no, we're not writing new ordinances. We're simply trying to correct definitions so that we don't have conflict between 32 and 38. Hopefully that explained it a little better.
Well, I think also we need to add to that, of the 11 applicants, how many turned down that property, did not purchase that property?
Or how many more were there that decided not to go in front of the BZA?
Exactly.
That just lived with the results of, I got to push my house back another 15 feet.
So it's,
And build a different house than what I had originally had my heart set on building. And now I'm going to build something else because I can't fit it within the parameters of the build zone, even though the definition says I can. So whether it's 2% or 1% or 1/100%. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Mr. Root, based on our discussion, if you say that one of these examples is the way to move forward, just in reading this, I'm not sure where it goes to correct what we're talking about. But if you want to plug it into an ordinance for us to see, maybe that's our next step.
Well, I think the point that you made is a good one. So I'm still looking. Were y'all able to track with me on the escape trail in lot 33?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so that, I think, Mr. Johnson, that's probably typical of a way developers will build to get more lots in. So that's running a driveway down, or it looks like it could be running a driveway down on lot 33 and getting behind parcel ending in 039. So that's your flag lot, and that's one you say would make sense to be measured from where it hits the minimum width. If you look over to lot 49 up on Vista, so I'm going to assume that does not meet the minimum width until it gets to the bend, perhaps. This one does not have a lot in front of where it would meet the minimum width, so it's different than lot 33. Are these the two kind of examples you're saying, hey, we should treat these differently?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Especially in the clear example is simply when you're driving down a neighborhood road and that owner just happens to own less than 80 feet of road frontage. His house is having to be placed in an area different than everybody else on the block if he had less than the 80 feet and it's in a residential zone.
Yeah, I can certainly come up with language that would fit and cover these two instances. That the trick is going to be, and that's why it goes to one, y'all's with experience and the fact that you're pointing to the positions in James' experience on all of the myriad examples that we can't think of right now. But I can say, if I'm just dialing in language to cover 33, all right, we're going to measure that from behind the lot ending in 039, and 49, we're going to measure that, from the front, from where it meets the road. That's easy enough to draft language that's going to cover those two. I just want to make sure y'all have.
Would people be in agreement to ask Mr. Root to draft something and bring it back to us to see if we can continue that discussion? Or are we in agreement that this even needs to be discussed? I mean, personally, the problem that we're seeing because things are going in front of the BZA is we're not talking about new subdivisions that have yet to be built. We're talking about existing stuff that people bought properties and now they can't build a house on it like they want without going in front of somebody with hat in hand. So, yes, Mr. Haney.
So I make a motion that we have Mr. Root draw this up into an ordinance, defining what a flag lot is, and also verbiage that will allow for odd-shaped lots not to have the same requirements as flag lots.
I would second that. And I'm hoping it can be within our existing stuff, that we're not creating something out of thin air necessarily, but we're cleaning it up a little bit.
Well, I think it's there. We've seen the flag lot. It
Picture.
has a minimum, but no maximum, so who decides what the maximum is? And that's where we're at right now.
Yes, sir. I would second that, and in defense of what Ms. Spicer said, I don't think we need to create a new ordinance for that. I think that we can clean up our existing stuff to fix that. So we have a first and a second to that. Do we have any more discussion?
So, just to catch up, lot 33 and lot 49 in these examples that we looked at, those are the two different types of lots we're talking about. 33 is really a flag lot. 49 is not. It's just an odd-shaped lot that there's a struggle to get to the 80-foot lot width. That's what we're talking about fixing the ordinances for. Is that correct?
And again, I think there's probably thousands of examples that we could pull up very quickly. Anything within a cul-de-sac is going to start at a smaller width.
But would all these examples, would they fall in one of these buckets or the other that we just discussed?
Yes.
Okay.
So in a cul-de-sac now, based on what we're discussing, in a cul-de-sac where you're going to have 20-foot access per home and everything pans out, the setback rule would say the front side setback is 25 feet off of the right-of-way. But you still can't start going vertical until the point at which the lot hits 80 feet wide, which is the two different things. Right now, we say the lot hit 80 feet wide, and then we enforce the 25-foot setback. And so we're trying to change that.
Okay, I got a question. Is what we're asking Mr. Root to do, including the definition of a flag lot?
That was my motion, yes.
If that, whatever Mr. Root needs to do to try to get this clearly defined with that intent.
I just want to make sure that's clear to Mr. Root, because
Yeah, exactly.
if we don't get something that tells us what the definition of a flag lot is, we're only getting part of what we need.
I would agree. Did all that make sense, Mr. Root?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Yes, sir.
So, by observation, we say lot 33 is a flag lot. As Gary said, how do we specifically know that that lot is a flag lot? What parameters tell us it is?
That's what we're asking Mr. Root for. Right now, the flag lot definition is that has to be at least 30 feet wide. If it's not 30 feet wide, which again, new developments going forward, sure, they can go, okay, I can meet that. Problem is that current people are now having to go get a variance.
The flag has to be 30 feet wide. But
According to our
the pole
current
wide-
definition, the flag has to be 30
flagpole.
feet wide.
But
the
how
flagpole.
wide can the flagpole be before it's not a flag lot?
And there's
That's the
not,
question.
that part is not defined.
Okay, so we need
30 feet.
a minimum
That's the
and
minimum.
maximum.
That's the minimum.
Oh, that's a-
And is that,
If you were to expand that width, at what point does it not become a flag lot?
Flag
That's the
lot.
question.
I think right now we're saying 80 feet.
Yeah, I think as applied, it's going to hit the minimum width.
Right now, we're applying it to the point at which it's 80 feet wide.
Okay.
So that's getting in a lot of these cul-de-sac style lots and pushing the houses
That's just exactly what we were fussing about.
Yeah.
Okay.
back.
State your motion one more time, because I would like Mr. Root to come back with something that we can look at and say, is this our intent?
So my motion is that we define what a flag lot is. What is the parameters of a flag lot? The pole specifically. And then also, I forgot the last part of it. I drew a blank. Deal with the setback for the verbiage for the setback on odd-shaped, irregular-shaped lots.
That do not fall into flag lot category.
Correct.
I would only add to that for a driveway, James, what is the minimum width for a driveway?
There is not a minimum width for a driveway. A driveway under chapter 26 is without a specific standard.
Then I think that it should be less than 30 feet as far as that minimum space for a flagpole. 20 feet or something like that. If you got a 12-foot driveway, give 5 feet to either side. If you said 20 as opposed to 30, that makes much more sense to me than saying 30 feet minimum for a flag lot. Is there a reason why that shouldn't, if it's just going to a house?
I wasn't here when that was drafted. I don't really know what the rationale at the time was.
that would make more sense because the lot might not be 30 feet, but you could put 20 feet. That's a 10-foot drive, 10-foot road service and 5 foot on each side, which gives you a buffer.
Well, just think how many people have a little gravel road going to their house with properties on either side of it that have this small area.
Right.
And then say it's just a lot without a house there yet. Now they can't build a house without going in front of a 7-member board and get permission.
Mr. Chair. James, I've got a question. So what does the fire marshal require or request?
International Fire Code, I'd have to look at it. I couldn't tell off the top of my head.
Because really, that's what's going to define what the width of the road going into a residence will be. And that should be the minimum.
The minimum standard is whatever the fire department needs.
Can I give you a little history?
I'll make a motion that we allow.
I'll second that.
Second that, all in favor of allowing Mr. Markovich to speak quickly? Say aye. All opposed?
Motion carries 6-1.
Yes, sir, Mr. Markovich.
All right, so we dealt with some of this a long, long time ago. We just didn't deal with it completely. Because when control-free, as you will know, all the subdivisions that were platted before 2002, there had to be an exception on the setbacks because, go to Port Bass. There's lots there that are only 25 feet wide at the most. Go to Kiwi Key. Most of the lots that are in Lake Residential don't even meet the standards at all. They're not even close. Look at that up there on Sweetwater. Sweetwater was platted a long time ago. Those are quarter-acre lots and less. And they're right on the water. And I don't know what the zoning on Sweetwater is, but I do know that it wouldn't have gotten approved at quarter-acre lots even back 20 years ago. So, anyway, so there may be it's going back and looking at the history of the particular subdivisions, where these lots are, and there needs to be exceptions to it, just like we did for control-free. Because you're gonna keep running into lots that were designed for trailers, and they just don't work for houses.
All right, so I'm lost. There is a motion that Mr. Haney made, and it was seconded to ask Mr. Root to further define flag lot and see if we can deal with these unusual shaped lots from a setback standpoint that meets the definitions under 38.
Is
Did I
this,
say
is
that
this
correctly?
going to include the conflict that was mentioned between, I think, 32 and 38?
I think that between the two of what Mr. Root can deal with, I think it does potentially do that.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure he realizes that's part of the assignment. Because, like when we get the information back, if that's not included, that would be a misstep.
Did all that make sense, Mr. Root?
Yes, it'll be my goal not to make the ordinance in conflict with one another.
Okay, let's vote on this. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Unanimous.
Excellent. Very good, people. Your motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We adjourn.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to apologize for not being there. Got Achilles rupture that I'm still dealing with, and my foot blows up like a balloon, but hopefully next time I'll see you all in person.
We are very appreciative that you took your time this evening by phone. Thank you so much for that.